صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. ثانيا على حب الزهراء عليها السلام. ثالثا على حب أمير المؤمنين صلوات الله وسلامه عليه. Brothers and sisters, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. For those that don't know me, my name is Brother Hussein Mhaidle. I'm the president of the LYC. I just wanted to start off by making a few announcements. First one, I wanted to thank, of course, the Al-Mustafa Association, the Al-Mustafa Academy for allowing us to join you guys here together in collaboration for this wonderful program. Some of the other housekeeping announcements as well that I'd like to make. Let's try our very best, brothers and sisters, just to keep the noise level down to a minimum. I know it's late and I know it's quite difficult, especially with young children. If you do need to step aside, there is the mother's room on the right-hand side and there's a father's room on the left-hand side. Some of the sisters on our side, on this side here, have prepared a few activities. They've got some coloring books, some Legos. Look out for Sister Amanda Haj Hassan, Sister Batul as well. They can assist you with your children. So please, let's try our very best to keep the noise level down to a minimum. For tonight's lecture, brothers and sisters, I do want to mention that it is on the topic of Nabi Lut alayhi salam. There is a recommendation that the subject matter that we're going to be discussing tonight is best suited for individuals, for children that are of the ages of 14 plus. So if you are uncomfortable with the subject matter, you'd like to step aside with your children, or if you would like to have them within the majlis listening to the lecture, please do so at your own discretion. But we wanted to give you a heads up that tonight's lecture will be about Nabi Lut alayhi salatu wassalam. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming the esteemed Sheikh Moutaz Al-Wehwah with three of your loudest salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Just before we begin, a request for a sister in the community currently in the hospital. If we can please recite 5 أَمَّنْ يُجِيبُهَا الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَاهُ وَيَكْشِفُ السُّوءَ together, preceded by salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. أَمَّنْ يُجِيبُهَا الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَاهُ وَيَكْشِفُ السُّوءَ أَمَّنْ يُجِيبُهَا الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَاهُ وَيَكْشِفُ السُّوءَ أمن يجيبه المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء أمن يجيبه المضطر إذا دعاه. إلى أرواح المؤمنين وموتى الحاضرين، لا سيما إلى موتى مؤسسي المجلس، إلى موتى المسلمين وعلمائنا العظام ومراجعنا، لا سيما السيد الإمام روح الله الموسوي الخميني. إلى أرواح شهدائنا، شهداء الإسلام، شهداء الدفاع المقدس، شهداء على طريق القدس. رحم الله من قرأ السورة المباركة الفاتحة مسبوقة بالصلاة على محمد وآل محمد. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على المبعوث رحمة للعالمين، حبيب قلوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا وشفيع ذنوبنا، سيدنا ومولانا أبا القاسم محمد. عليه وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين لا سيما بقية الله في الأراضين روح وأرواح العالمين لتراب مقدمه الفدا واللعنة الدائمة على أعدائهم أجمعين منذ آدم إلى قيام يوم الدين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. قال تعالى في محكم التنزيل بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم ولوطا إذ قال لقومه أتأتون الفاحشة ما سبقكم بها من أحد من العالمين إنكم لتأتون الرجال شهوة من دون النساء بل أنتم قوم مسرفون وما كان جواب قومه إلا أن قالوا أخرجوهم من قريتكم إنهم أناس يتطهرون فأنجيناه وأهله إلا امرأته كانت من الغابرين وأمطرنا عليهم مطرا فانظر كيف كان عاقبة المجرمين. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. Allah Ta'ala says in Surah Al-A'raf, ayah number 80, and we sent Lot when he said to his people, what do you commit an indecency which anyone in the world has not done before you? Most surely you come to the males in lust besides females, nay, you are an extravagant people. And the answer of his people was no other than that they said, turn them out of our town, surely they are a people who seek to purify themselves. So we delivered him and his followers except his wife. She was of those who remained behind, and we rained upon them a rain. Consider then what was the end of the guilty. Sadaqallahu al-Aliyyul Azim. Nabiullah Lut alayhi salam is one of our oppressed and forgotten prophets. Even though his story is repeated several times in the Holy Quran, Lut, from what I can briefly recall, is mentioned 27 times in the Holy Quran. Lut salamullahi alayhi is the nephew of Nabiullah Ibrahim alayhi salam. So the scholars differed whether it's his brother, it's Ibrahim's brother's son or his sister's son, but we know that he was the nephew of Ibrahim alayhi salam. And we know that he was with Ibrahim alayhi salam in Babylon when Ibrahim alayhi salam was thrown into the fire, and then he migrated with him salamullahi alayhi to the land of Palestine. And he settled in the land of Sodom in modern day Palestine. Most of you already know the crimes that the people of Lut alayhi salam would commit. This Prophet of Allah was tested with one of the most atrocious nations to ever rise amongst mankind back then. Today, we have surpassed these people. The people of Lut, salamullahi alayhi, we see that in the Holy Quran when Allah Ta'ala addresses them and addresses their misdeeds, it's unlike the people before him, or unlike the nations of other prophets, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is addressing their ideological deviances or the deviance in their belief system. Others would worship idols, would worship trees, they would worship their forefathers, etc., etc. And Allah Ta'ala would send them prophets to call them onto Tawheed. With Lut alayhi salam, the situation is different. With Lut salamullahi alayhi, Allah sends him to a people so that he may guide them away from deviant actions and behaviors and practices. Amongst the sins, the grave sins that the people of Lut alayhi salam were known for, before we get to the major sin, and it's good that we understand the sins that led to the great deviance of his people. The people of Lut alayhi salam were known for being road bandits. They would look for the caravans coming through their territories, and they would rob them. Second, they were known for their stinginess. They were very, very stingy, al-bukhl. They were not generous, they did not love to welcome in the guest, and this has a lot to do with the sin that we will talk about later on. So they did not love guests, they were very, very stingy. They would consume alcohol and forbidden substances in their gatherings. This is another sin of theirs. They were known for it. Something else they were known for is that they were unclean. They did not like to clean. They did not like to wash. Now, some of our narrations, they suggest to us that these particular sins are all the result of one another before we get to the major sin of homosexuality. And that these sins, they stem from their sin of being stingy in the first place. You see where their city is, Sodom and Gomorrah, these two cities, we understand from our narrations that they were cities that travelers would often pass by. They were at a crossroads. So travelers would stop there to rest. And when you stop to rest back in those days, you expect the generosity of the local population. And because they were not a generous people, they would get irritated. Every time a caravan would come by, they would be irritated that these guests were coming to stay. Now we need to spend on them. They need to eat our food. They need to drink from us. They're going to spend a few nights here. So our narration suggests that Iblis began to suggest to them particular actions to make sure that people no longer visit them. Amongst these actions, the first suggestion was, you should rob these caravans that come. Let it be known that you are a people who is dangerous, that you will stop the caravans and you will rob them before they get to your city. But some caravans continued to come through. And the second suggestion that Iblis made to them was that if you were to be unclean and unhygienic and you would smell, then people will not come and stay in your town. They would not seek you out and stay in your town. This was not enough. Eventually, Iblis recommended to them the lewd and indecent act of homosexuality. Knowing that if word spread that the people of this town were like this, that they would force themselves on the men of the caravans, then the people will not come and stay in this town, until it became a habit. All of these things became habits later on. So through time, stinginess, alcoholism, robbing or being bandits, being unclean, and the act of homosexuality became a habit of the town over time. They no longer did it simply to keep guests away. This became a way of their life. And this goes in hand with our narrations that indicate that when you are persistent on a particular sin, it begins to leave a mark on your soul. So much so that this sin begins to mold your persona. It begins to mold who you are. Your identity begins to be built around this particular sin. And then it becomes extremely hard to get rid of this. Lut alayhi salam comes to this town, and we'll touch briefly on the story of Lut alayhi salam, and then we'll go on to what we want to take from it tonight, inshallah. Because as we said, we're not here to go into the details of the stories. Lut alayhi salam spends years arguing and begging his people to abandon these acts, and mainly to abandon the act of homosexuality. Lut salamullahi alayhi, he expresses to his people of how wretched and how unnatural this act is. Not only would men prefer the men, but they would force themselves on the men who were not practicing this act. They would forcefully, they would force themselves on them to practice this act. Just on this point, there are some today, unfortunately, because we live in such a deviant society, right? And we live in a world that promotes all acts of deviance, all unnatural acts, unfortunately. These voices have crawled into the Islamic world today. So if you go online, you will find studies and discussions by those who claim to be Muslims trying to justify this act and say that it is not forbidden in Islam. Rather, what is forbidden in Islam, the argument they use when they use the story of Lut alayhi salam, what is forbidden is to forcefully press this act against another person. So basically, the act of rape, this is what's forbidden. And it's a silly argument because the counter argument is, so are you saying that it is only rape in this instance that is haram? If it were to be if it were a man against a woman or a woman against a man, then it would be okay? Is this what Allah Ta'ala is saying to us? Wal-'iyadhu billah? This is not the case. Allah Ta'ala is very clear, very explicit in the Holy Quran and in the Old Testament and in the New Testament that this is a grave sin. Lut alayhi salam eventually becomes tired of his people, and his people, subhanallah, look at the accusation that they give against Lut, and it's extremely interesting to keep in your mind for tonight. When they want to admonish Lut, when they want to offend Lut, they say, turn him and his people out, for they are amongst those who like to purify. They are amongst those who like to clean themselves. So cleanliness became a vice in their community. If you were someone who washed and cleaned and showered often, this was seen as an evil act. And this reminds me of a narration by the Holy Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. If you give me a salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad, I pull this out inshallah. فرجا ثاني على حب الزهراء. It is narrated that the Holy Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa alihi says, it's a narration Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam narrates on behalf of the Holy Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. He says, قال النبي صلى الله عليه وآله. Pay attention to the words of this narration and see if you can relate to it today. كيف بكم إذا فسدت نساؤكم وفسق شبابكم ولم تأمروا بالمعروف ولم تنهوا عن المنكر. How would be your situation if your women and your young men became corrupt and you do not enjoy good? He's addressing the Muslims. And you do not enjoy good and you do not forbid evil. The companions asked, وَيَكُونَ ذَلِكَ يَا رَسُولَ اللَّهِ. Is this even possible? Look at the companions at the time of the Holy Messenger. They could not fathom this. How is it that our women will become corrupt, and so would our youth, and no one enjoins good and no one forbids evil? Because this is a society that they were accustomed to. They were accustomed to a society in the presence of the Holy Messenger that would enjoin good and forbid evil. And women were not corrupt. And young men were the core foundation of Islam. Islam was built around the youth at that time. It was seen as a religion of the youth. So the people at the time of the Holy Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam could not fathom this. So they asked him, will this happen, Ya Rasulullah? How can this happen? The Holy Messenger says, وَيَكُونُ فَقَالَ نَعَمْ وَشَرْ مِنْ ذَلِكَ. Yes, and worse than this. The next level. كيف بكم إذا أمرتم بالمنكر وإذا أمرتم بالمنكر ونهيتم عن المعروف. How would be your situation? What would your situation be like when you enjoin evil and you forbid good? Where you start to recommend and suggest and promote the concept of practicing evil, and that which is good, you condemn and you command and demand that people do not practice this. And this starts at the very grassroots level, brothers and sisters. This starts in our communities and something as simple as hijab. So many times a young sister will come and say to me, I want to wear hijab, Sheikh, but my father won't let me. My mother discourages the hijab. She says to me, I'm too young. I shouldn't be wearing it. It makes me look ugly. It makes me look old. It's going to restrict me in the future. This is parents now giving priority to the dunya of their children over their akhirah, discouraging them from doing that which is good and encouraging that which is evil. It gets worse than this. The Holy Messenger says, Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali. Mother and Shaykh. The companions ask, and will this be, Ya Rasulullah? قال نعم وشر من ذلك كيف بكم إذا رأيتم المعروف منكر والمنكر معروف. What would be your situation? What would be your stance? How would you be as an ummah if you began to view that which was evil as good and that which was good as evil? The standards change. Your values change. Innately you become corrupt. So corrupt that good becomes evil and evil becomes good. So corrupt that you end up like the people of Lut alayhi salam, that when they wanted to admonish him, when they wanted to accuse him, when they wanted to downplay him, they accused him and his people of being amongst those who purify and clean themselves. This was seen as something wretched. إِنَّهُمْ قَوْمٌ يَتَطَهَّرُونَ. Like it's something disgusting. Look how vile they are. They are so vile, they wash themselves. They clean themselves. This is how evil these people are. Subhanallah, you're reminded of a personal story. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali. You know, growing up in Sydney, and we as Muslims, you know, we're accustomed to that, وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ, that when we, ajallakumullah, go to the bathroom, we have particular etiquette. We need to wash ourselves, right? So one day I'm at work, and a Caucasian brother, he just comes up to me and he says to me, do you got, in a very heavy Australian accent, he says, you guys get thirsty in the bathroom, mate? Yeah. I said, what? He says, every time I see a Muslim go to they're taking a big bottle of water in there and it comes out empty. You know? You need to explain to him what happens. And he found it astonishing. What? Every time? I said, yeah. Then he started calling the other Caucasian. He's like, come here, listen to this. Did you know they do this? They viewed it as such a hassle. Because in their societies, they have become so far away from human nature that a simple concept like cleanliness became foreign to them. Became foreign to them. Became seen as a hassle. So hard being a Muslim, mate. This is what he's saying to me. How many bottles of water you go through a day? This is, you know, they couldn't believe this. The people of Lut reached here. Unfortunately, in the world today, we are far beyond this. When Lut alayhi salam speaks to his people, he says to them that this wretched act, no nation before you had preceded you in. You are the vilest of nations. Today, this act that the people of Lut committed is the rule of thumb. It is what's common. It is viewed as progressive. it is viewed as liberal. It is viewed as democratic and humane and the most beautiful display of love that there is. And they will present it to you in a manner that this is the way forward for humanity. And this is not something that happened overnight, right? So growing up in the 90s in Sydney, this was not okay, even amongst the non-Muslim. This was not okay. This was seen as something vile. It was seen as something disgusting. Extremely vile and extremely disgusting. Muslim and non-Muslim alike rejected this action. But the powers that be, and you need to remember the other night when we spoke about shaitan and the forces of shaitan, that they work, they are active. They are active. They are working on every faculty of humanity. It's not that things like this just happen. When I sit back now and I think back, well, how did we get here? How did humanity get here? How did this act go from being something which was criminalized in the West under the rule of the Catholic Church? It was punishable by death. And then the sentence was decreased to a prison sentence. And then the prison sentences were slowly decreased. And then it turned into a fine. And then it was decriminalized. Then they were seen as an oppressed people. Then their lifestyle was deemed flamboyant. And if you wanted to be associated with happiness, you would bring them as an example. So much so that their way of life took on a synonym of happiness, gay. They are only happy. This is what they are. And the media played a major role, because when I look back now and I think of some of the rubbish I used to watch, brothers and sisters, as a child, some of these sitcoms, some of these movies, more often than not, in whatever sitcom or movie or TV series, there was always one of these characters in there. And there was always one. And he was always the funniest. Right? He's always the funny guy. He's the cool guy. He's the one that knows how to dress. He looks sharp. He's successful. So they got us accustomed to bonding with these individuals through media. We became desensitized to them. In fact, their way of life became attractive to you and I. It was mass indoctrination on a global scale, brothers and sisters. Until this heresy exploded onto the scene and it became celebrated in Sydney. I don't know if you guys have it here, but in Sydney we have an annual Mardi Gras for this, yeah? It's like an annual pilgrimage. They come from all over the world. They converge on Sydney, and it's like a week of festivities followed by what? This massive parade all the way through Sydney. And it's attended by tens, if not hundreds of thousands. Government funds, millions of dollars go into this. But they don't have these funds to take care of the homeless, to take care of the poor. They don't have these funds for mental health, for our health care. But when it comes to this, we have gotten to a point today where when we thought that it could not get any worse, the simple act of homosexuality became the least of our concerns right now. Things have gotten way out of hand. Way out of hand. Where we look back now and we say, you know what, we wish that we could go back 15, 20 years ago when it was just that we had to worry about, you know? Men being with men and women being with women. Today, it is a campaign of mass confusion. As we said the other night, your very own identity as a human being is what's being targeted. Your biological makeup is what's being targeted. There is a war against you as a person. Where eventually, if you were to identify as male or female simply, eventually you'll become the minority. There are states right now in Australia where when a child is born, it is illegal for the parents to classify them as male or female. It's illegal. You need to wait, the child will choose. Freedom of choice. This child can't elect his elected officials, by the way, yeah? He can't vote in an elected official. He can't buy a pack of cigarettes. But he can ask the government for money at the age of 4, 5, and 6. For what? For corrective gender surgery. And the government will give him money. And he will force this on his parents. And the government will force his parents. It's gotten to the extent where if you refuse to allow your child to undergo this type of mutilation, physical mutilation, you can be charged with battery. You know what battery is? So, if I say to my child, you know what, I'm not going to let you go and have this gender reassignment, or what they call now gender correction surgery, it's the same as me punching him in the face. They consider it the same thing. This is a form of battery. It's physical abuse. What you've done is you've physically abused this child. And you can go to prison for it. And the child can be removed from you. It is a deviance which has now become enforced by law. Enforced by law. So we have a duty here, brothers and sisters. We have a duty to protect ourselves and our children. We spoke about the other night how we need to be active in standing up against this. But now let's talk about in-house, how we are supposed to protect ourselves, inshallah, with a salat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Protecting our children begins at home from a very young age. You know, before tonight and any time I come to speak about this topic, as Brother Hussein did, we do like to give a warning, yeah? Age restriction warning. And to be very, very honest with you, this is my opinion, inshallah. I don't like giving this warning. I don't think there should be an age restriction, and I'll tell you why. Because when it comes to the alternative narrative, when it comes to the narrative of the Taghut, when it comes to the narrative of deviance, when it comes to the narrative of shaitan, there is no age restriction. They come to your children as soon as they set foot in school. They come for them. And they present their narrative to them. So if I'm shying away from putting forward my narrative and letting this child receive this information up until I deem it appropriate at what, 14, 15, 16, he's already had 5, 6 years, 7, 8 years at school where he's being indoctrinated by who? By the Taghut. He's received that information already. So they've forced us into a corner where we need to be having these discussions with our children at a very young age. Why? Because they're having that discussion with them at a very young age. And I cannot leave that void. I can't leave that vacuum. When there's a vacuum and a void and my enemy has an aggressive presence, he will fill that void. He will fill that vacuum. He will paint my children in whatever colors he wishes to. He will mold them. And by the time I come around and I think it is now appropriate to talk to them, it's already too late. It's already too late, brothers and sisters. And I'm not just talking about the act of homosexuality. I am talking about in general, how Islam views intimacy in general. These are conversations that we need to be having with our children because this act is a deviation in intimacy. This is all it is. I can't sit there and put my head in the sand and say, no, I'm too embarrassed or it's inappropriate Like we said, these are conversations that your children are already having behind your backs. Their teachers are having this conversation with them. The government is having this conversation with them. Media is having this conversation with them. Music, movies, everything is speaking to them about this except for you. You and I are shying away from presenting the narrative of Islam. And when I don't present the narrative of Islam on these issues, I am giving room for falsehood to progress. You know, there's a philosophical opinion. It's just an opinion, but it's good to bring it up here. That ashar, evil, is amr adami. It's not something that actually exists, right? It's just like we say, al-dhalam adamun nur. Darkness, darkness is only the lack of existence of light. When there's no light, there's darkness. But darkness doesn't actually exist within itself. So there's one philosophical approach that says evil does not exist alone. It's amr adami. That it is only the absence of good that we call evil. When there is no good, we say this is evil, this is shar. So, if I'm going to take this philosophy on board, when I am not promoting that which is good, meaning Islam, when I'm not indoctrinating my children and our youth with the opinion of Islam, then this lack of Islam is what I call shar. This is what's evil, this void here. And this void can take on the shape and color of whatever is being aggressively enforced upon it. And there is no lack of means out there today, brothers and sisters. All you need to do is just jump online for a second, or watch a movie, or read a book, or walk out into the streets. But you just want to, the other day I went for a walk with a few of the brothers, just walking. Yeah? Is there a more innocent pastime than just walking? Just going for a damn walk. You just want to walk. And you're bombarded by these colors everywhere, and the flags, and the badges. And I said to the brother, where have you brought me, man? He says, oh, this is everywhere. So clearly it's everywhere. It's forced upon you. So I need to understand that Islam, this religion of Allah Ta'ala, that He intended لِيُظْهِرَهُ عَلَى الدِّينِ كُلِّهِ وَلَوْ كَرِهَ الْمُشْرِكُونَ, has an answer for everything and a solution for everything. And when I abandon Islam's answer, when I do not take it upon myself to speak about these things and educate my children, then I have left my children and my youth to the enemies of Allah Ta'ala. Let's take, for example, brothers and sisters, the physical act of intimacy. That we culturally, yes, we're a nation of haya, yeah? So we don't sit here and speak about this stuff open. And I've had to discuss these things with my teachers before saying to them why I feel the need to discuss, and they agree with me. They say, yes, now we're at a time. Go back 20 years, 30 years. They say, on the minbar, this should not be discussed. Discuss this privately, write a book. Say, not everyone reads these books. They think that everyone write a book about it. It's not the case anymore. If it's not discussed on the minbar, no one will hear about it. If it's not put online, no one will discuss it. The physical act of intimacy in Islam has its own philosophy. It differs from the Judeo-Christian narrative that this is an act which is impure. The Judeo-Christian narrative views it this way. Even between husband and wife, it is impure and should only be done for the sake of procreation. Okay? This is why they view that if they want to spiritually elevate themselves, they go into monkhood or priesthood and they abstain. And we've seen all the filthy problems that this causes, correct? All the filth that it causes. But it's seen in a Judeo-Christian narrative as that which is impure. Islam comes and says no. In fact, it can be a practice which is spiritually uplifting and is encouraged within the constraints of the Shara. And it's something which can bring you closer to Allah Azza wa Jal. So much so that we have ad'iyah, we have adhkar specific for this. But how and when and why, Islam comes and controls it. But this is not a conversation that we have with our youth. We stigmatize it. Unfortunately, as Muslims coming from the East specifically, we've taken on this Judeo-Christian narrative of the act, misinterpreted it for haya, and then left our youth to develop an ideology on this, which is based on the teachings of who? The Taghut. So our youth have gone out there and fallen into all sorts of problems, when these are problems that we could have solved at home by simply having these discussions. Our schools have this responsibility. Our parents have this responsibility. Our ulama have this responsibility. We can no longer put our head in the sand. Or we reach the stage of the people of Nuh, people of Lut, alayhi salam, because we refuse to enjoin good and forbid evil, because we refuse to have these discussions, then the scales have been turned completely. Good becomes evil and evil becomes good. These mafahim turn. And as the narration says, the Holy Messenger is basically asking us, sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, what is it that you will do then? We say, Ya Allah, I was practicing haya, I was shy, this is why I didn't have this discussion. Allah Ta'ala will say to you, you had more haya than my beloved Messenger. You had more haya than the Imams I sent you, alayhum salam. Entire chapters in Al-Kafi, Wasa'il al-Shi'a dedicated to this behavior. The Imams would sit there with their companions. There are some narrations, the companions are so comfortable discussing these things with the Imams alayhim salam that they ask them specific things, very specific, very, very specific. And the Imams will tell them, we encourage this, we don't encourage this. Now it's, oh, I'm too pious to even hear this. Don't ask me this question, brother. It's inappropriate. Who are they going to ask? If they can't ask the shuyukh, and they can't ask their teachers, and they can't ask their parents, who are they going to ask? TikTok. These government schools who come and say to you, you know what, there's no restriction on this act. With whomever, whatever, whenever, wherever you feel like it, do it. Go ahead and do it. As a male, as a female, and everything in between. Do it. Love is love. Isn't this their slogan? Love is love. This is what liberalism is. This is what freedom is. Why? Because I don't want to talk about this. What's happening in the world today is probably the most dangerous form of warfare to befall mankind from Adam alayhi salam. Corruption has reached our very biological makeup. Corruption has reached the fitrah of mankind. The fitrah. Where there are those out there that are convinced, even in the Muslim world, mind you, yeah? Some in the Muslim world who would now come and try to say to you things like, these poor people, they're oppressed. We need to welcome them in. Don't accept the act, but welcome them in. Anyone here seen the movie V for Vendetta? Put your hand up. Great movie. Don't watch it. I was enjoying this movie. I like my movies. A brother recommended it to me. May Allah forgive him. And I start to watch this movie. And I'm really enjoying it. I'm thinking, how on earth did Hollywood allow this movie, you know? It has so many revolutionary ideas in it. Standing up for the oppressed, challenging the system, being a champion for the downtrodden, resistance, all of this. I'm thinking, wow. Until you get to the turning point, what sparked this revolution? What sparked this man to revolt against the system? It was a love story between two women. And they're oppressed, and she's passed him the note in the prison, and this is why we're in prison. And then Allahu Akbar, I must destroy the entire world to avenge this love. Yeah? They ruined the whole movie for me. But it's too late. You'd invested already about an hour and a bit before they put it in there. This is how they're working on you and I, right? This is how they're working on us. Islam comes and says to you, no, have these discussions. Please have them. Have them because Islam, in its laws, in its jurisprudence, aims to protect and to preserve your identity as a human being, first and foremost. Today in this world is our opportunity. I don't think Islam has ever had an opportunity like today to present itself as a savior of humanity. These deviations, these corruptions do not sit well with many of the non-Muslims today. It doesn't sit well with them. And they are now seeking out an ideology. They are looking for a savior to save them from this mess that they are in. Their children are confused. Their youth are confused. Their societies are confused. Nobody knows what's what and who's who. They claim to be the champions of women's rights, but yet they can't even identify what a woman actually is. Ask them today to identify what a woman is. They say, we don't know, but we champion women's rights. How are you going to champion women's rights and feminism when you don't even know? You don't have a particular definition for what a woman is. We have an opportunity today. Instead of shying away and being afraid, we have an opportunity to introduce Islam into these societies and these communities as the savior. You know, one of the wisdoms, and we've been passing these small wisdoms on the occultation, behind the occultation of the Imam Sahib al-Zaman alayhi salam. One of the wisdoms is that mankind, the non-Muslim before the Muslim, mankind will reach a state of desperation that the solutions of mankind, the solutions presented by the earthly and worldly powers are no longer enough, and they start to look to the skies. They start to crave a savior from the heavens to come and rid them of the rubbish that they have drowned in. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us and protect our youth, protect our children from these deviances, and give us the strength to not only avoid the deviances, but give us the strength and the courage to stand in their faces so that we can implement the law of Allah Ta'ala and implement the society that Allah Azza wa Jal intended for the salvation of mankind. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma inna narghabu ilayka fi dawlatin karima تعز بها الإسلام وأهله وتذل بها النفاق وأهله وتجعلنا فيها من الدعاة إلى طاعتك والقادة إلى سبيلك وترزقنا بها كرامة الدنيا والآخرة بمحمد وعترته الطاهرة صلواتك عليه وعليهم أجمعين.
Ahsant, Maulana, Ahsant. Inshallah, we can all be leaders of Amr bil Ma'ruf wa Nahi an al Munkar bihaq Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. I just wanted to really commend the sisters. I know it was really difficult keeping some of the children quiet, but I really wanted to commend them. So let's give salawat ala Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad for the sisters for keeping things, the volume down to a minimum. Sallu ala Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. We'll do ziyarah and dua al-faraj, inshallah.
السلام عليك يا رسول الله، السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين، السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء، السلام عليك يا حسن المجتبى، السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله، وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت، وبقي الليل والنهار، ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. السلام على 9 المعصومين من ذرية الحسين، علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي. الصلاة والسلام عليك سيدي ومولاي يا صاحب العصر والزمان، وخليفة الرحمن وإمام الإنس والجان. عجل الله تعالى فرجه، وسهل الله تعالى مخرجا وظهورا. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. Inshallah, this coming Friday we'll be having a youth bonfire discussion with the boys and the girls, inshallah, with Samahat Sheikh Moutaz and Samahat Sheikh Murtada Bachu, inshallah, happening after the lecture. And on Saturday, inshallah, we'll be having Mawlid Imam al-Hassan al-Mujtaba alayhi salam, also happening here starting at 7 p.m. With Dua al-Iftitah and the Quran circle, and then following Salat al-Maghribain and Iftar, and then the lecture, inshallah. Sallu ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad.